Okay, so good morning, everyone. Afternoon, sorry, we normally do our webinars in the morning, so I'm still in morning mode. But yeah, welcome everyone. So what we're going to do today is an awesome webinar. I'm so excited to be sharing the screen with David. David is from GRG Outsourcing, so he's obviously an HR company. And what he is he's the CEO. And so today he's going to be helping us and helping businesses by being more successful and sustainable. So he's got quite an interesting slideshow he's going to be presenting to us and presentation that I think will be fascinating. But you'll hear more about me later, but I'll start off obviously with David's presentation, and then we'll head over to me afterwards. So David, off with you.
Nicky, thank you so much for that introduction. And it's so wonderful to be here with everyone this afternoon and to be sharing some thoughts about building better businesses. Certainly we look at post-COVID as a time where we should be rebooting and looking at better ways to run our organizations. But of course, this is something that we should be doing all the time. We should always be looking at our businesses. What we've done through the companies DRG and Business Fit and DRG CIA and PDA, we've come up with a framework. It has 34 different areas of focus. Essentially, out of those 34 areas, there's just 4 groups of activities. So it's really easy. We're always saying to people, take an objective perspective of your business. And it's when you are taking an objective perspective of your business, it's always helpful if you're using somebody else's template. So this is the template that everyone is welcome to use. Of course, it's not the only template. The 34 aspects can be covered in different ways. But just to tell you, just to give you a little bit of background, DRG, we're 24 years old as an organization, and our mission is to help companies to create compliant, engaged, productive, and sustainable businesses. And within Business Fit, we mentor entrepreneurs. So between DRG and Business Fit, we work with a huge range of clients across all industries. And this is something that we've put together over time. And the aim is when we're sitting with a business leader or an entrepreneur and we have limited time with them, we try and scan our conversation and make sure we've covered a lot of these topics. So it all starts with King 4. And from an ethics perspective, our responsibility is to create sustainable enterprises. So when we think of the word sustainability, it's actually an enormous word. And quite often people just talk about, yes, we need to create a sustainable organization, but sometimes they don't know all of those details, and we can unpack some of it today. The other area of focus is stakeholder expectations. So when we ran businesses in the old days, we would really look at how the clients looked at us and how the shareholders looked at us. And those were the 2 main measurements. But of course, over time, other stakeholders have become very, very important. And those are our employees, our suppliers, the environment, communities. And it becomes so important that we focus on stakeholder expectations because those become the measurements in our business. So when we look at sustainability and this big word, of course it refers to we need to create organizations that are going to last tomorrow and the day after. That is critically important. But the more we start thinking about sustainability, the more we realize that the only way we can be sustainable is if the world around us is sustainable. So when we're looking at global sustainability, we look at 3 areas. We look at the economy itself, we look at the environment, and we look at the social impact. Those are the 3 areas, and that's referred to as sustainability. So our responsibility as business leaders is to look at these different areas and try and create balance. So if you look at the points just the way they are today, we're totally out of balance. Businesses are so inefficient. We create so much waste. So many of the organizations fail. They waste time, they waste raw materials. So business in themselves are not very sustainable at all. If we look at the environment, we've just, as humanity, we've made a mess of the environment. If you just look at some of the indicators, plastic hasn't been around for a very, very long time, but we've already put 150 million tons of plastic into the sea. And if we had to stretch that plastic out, it would go around the earth 3 or 4 times. There's so much plastic in the sea already. We pump 40 billion tons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. We chop down forests to create toothpicks. So we're really, really messing up the environment. And from a social impact, it's just an absolute disaster. It's something like 1% of the world owns 93% of the assets. 80% of people in Africa are always hungry. So these are some of the challenges we as entrepreneurs and business leaders need to help fix. So when we look at sustainability and the green economy, we can imagine that there's going to be a lot of new products and services. So economists estimate that the green economy, the economy of tomorrow, is worth trillions of dollars. So now we know our responsibility as business leaders is to create a sustainable work environment and sustainable businesses. And to do that, we need to consider those different areas: our own business, ourselves, the environment, and also the social impact, where training and development and opportunity exists. But how do we do that? So we as practitioners, business practitioners, we look at energy as that one special thing that is going to make this huge, huge difference. So when we look at energy, energy is about moving people or systems from one point to another. And when we look at employee engagement, it's a culture of energy. So those become really, really important terms, and we'll discuss them in a bit more detail. So energy, we'll argue that energy comes from purpose, because if you have purpose and you walk with purpose, it creates your circumstances. But if you look at it very simply, energy comes from people and the way we interact with each other, and it also comes from circumstances. So circumstances create energy, and certainly COVID has done that for us. It's created energy for us to move our businesses and set them up in a different way to ensure that they can continue. When we're looking at business leaders and team members, we look at potential energy and kinetic energy. So we know it's essential for a business leader to have potential energy, and we know that a team needs to have kinetic energy. So potential energy is the stored energy. An entrepreneur, a business leader has an idea, has a vision, and wants to do it so badly. There's such a strong belief that he or she builds up this energy. And this energy then needs to be transferred to the team, where it becomes kinetic energy. Just as a simple demonstration, if you hold a ball above your head, it has potential energy because gravity is pulling on it. But as you let that ball go, it converts into kinetic energy. So we see this balance. We need to have a leader that's able to drive directions, drive change, drive that vision, and the team needs to agree and support that vision, and they need to help the organization with its day-to-day activities and to help to meet goals and expectations of the business. So when we're looking at businesses, we really look at these 4 areas. And the first one is leadership. And under leadership, we look at the vision and confidence that the leader has. And we'll talk about those in a bit more detail. We look at a solid business foundation. We look at the measurements, which is the stakeholder expectations in the business. And then we look at the teams of people that engage work environment. And under that, we look at purpose and commitment. This is just another way of saying of describing those same four areas. We have leadership, the functional area support, measurements, and that engaged work environment. So, leadership is the idea generation. It's that purpose and passion that the leader has. The functional areas, these are common in big companies, small companies. Most people who went to study after finishing school studied in one of these functional areas. They studied marketing or legal or finance or HR. We know that these are common in organizations and they can be duplicated. We know that the leadership and the vision and the passion, that determination, that's very difficult for people to copy. So we look at the leader, we want the vision, we want the solid foundation. It's going to go through some of the points. Under HR, when our business starts, we need to have contracts of employment, we need to have role clarity, we need to have policies, induction. Under marketing, we need to know who our specific target market is, and we need to know how to get to that target market. Legal, we need to have service agreements, we need to have supplier agreements so that everybody can understand how we fit together. Finance, we need to know our cash flows and our budgets and our margins. Operations, we need quality assurance. Strategy, we need to know where we are and how we're going to get to where we want to be. And IT, obviously, we need systems. So all of those activities help to ensure that all the administration and the quality assurance and the best practice and all the communication happens. Now, the leader needs to define what the measurements are. And we look at the measurements as the reason for the business existence. We always say that successful businesses need to know exactly where they're going. If they don't know exactly where they're going, then it doesn't really matter where they end up. So we need to define those measurements very clearly. And these measurements, we look at the impact that we're having on them. And we'll discuss that a little bit further as well. The engaged working environment. This is the aspect that ensures the continuation of the business. This is the team of people that take the leader's vision, that work within the functional areas and work towards the measurements in the organization. This is just another way of putting it. We have the leader directing at the top, the business process at the bottom of the triangle, the measurements around the side, and what pulls it all together is the energy that the business has. So just interestingly, organizations on average, and this is a worldwide survey, are only 40% productive, which is quite unbelievable. And if we link it to another statistics, which says that only 20 to 25% of people enjoy getting up in the morning and going to work, we can see where aspects are out of balance. If people enjoyed their work experience, if they enjoyed getting up, if they had that feeling of contribution and a feeling of belonging, then certainly their energy levels would grow. And we see it all the time. Grow energy, grow productivity. It is just as simple as that. So looking at businesses, it's important for us to be able to understand where we can help businesses. So sitting with entrepreneurs, we're listening to them to recognize what they do have in place. We're listening to them to recognize what kind of potential the organization has, and also where we can help them. So whatever they have in place, that is just amazing. Whatever they don't have in place, we can help them to understand and to develop. So looking at the leader and looking at that vision and confidence that we expect the leader to have. So the vision, it must be clear. It must contribute towards meeting consumer wants and needs. It must support the green economy. It must have strong belief, ethics, and values, and also recognize that he or she cannot meet all these expectations themselves, and they have to draw other people in. To build confidence, there must be this business-minded approach. People must understand that a business foundation is critical, and it's also helpful if they have core competency. So if somebody was going to start an electrical business, it would make sense that they knew they were an electrician or certainly had some of those capabilities. So the core competency is important. Authentic and real. We can't be anything other than a true copy of ourselves. If we're trying to imitate someone else, it just doesn't have the energy, and on a difficult day, we tend to give up. So we always look for, are these authentic and real ideas that the entrepreneur has come up with. Resilient, of course, is absolutely important, but it's also learning from the situation and recovering quickly. So obviously that's important. And then confidence. People have to be able to drive goal-orientated activities. They have to push through to make sure that their ideas do create the momentum they're looking for. So this is all about the leader. When we look at the functional foundations, and we've been through these in some detail, the only one we haven't really spoken about is ethics and governance. Of course, ethics is that first foundation. If we want our businesses to be sustainable, we have to make sure we're operating within the regulations of the business structure, and also looking after all of the stakeholders. When we start looking at the stakeholders, this is pretty much what they look like. They're employees, they're customers, suppliers, they're shareholders, funders, the government, communities, environment. So you can see from our earlier discussions, when we're talking about sustainability and we're talking about the environment, it's so important that we're not buying goods that have been, for example, tested on animals. We're not buying goods that are polluting the oceans. So, of course, there will be this drive from consumers to demand products that aren't damaging the environment. But we as entrepreneurs need to also recognize our responsibility in leading these processes. We need to make sure that all of these stakeholders achieve the expectations that we want them to. And for that, we need to have clear descriptions of how we meet these goals. For example, employees. We want to have highly engaged employees taking self-directed action within the business. Customers, we want people to be happy with our products, and we want them to help us understand how we can improve. Suppliers want to feel that they're important in our businesses. They also want to be paid on time. Shareholders, they want to receive their dividends. Banks want to make sure that their money that they've loaned us is secure. Governments, they of course want your pay as you earn and your VAT, and Department of Labour wants to know how many more people you're employing. The SETAs want to know what kind of training programs you have in place. And then we have workmen's compensation and UIF and other social security aspects. Communities, as business leaders, we need to be aware of the impact we're having on local communities, the environment we've spoken about a lot, and having a total quality management system that ensures we pull all of this together correctly. When we look at the teams and the work environment, we look at two aspects, purpose and commitment. Under purpose, we look at the staff members that join the organization. They need to embrace the vision, the values, the ethics of the leader and the enterprise. They need to have the ability to do the work. They need experience. They need to feel that they're contributing towards a greater cause, doing something that the world needs, and they need to receive fair pay and reward. I don't know if anyone knows anything about the Japanese philosophy called Ikigai. It's quite incredible, and there's a lot of information on the internet. I found it quite recently, and I just couldn't believe how simple it was. and how precise it actually is. But Ikigai was from an island just off Japan, where people live the longest in the world, and they're actually the happiest too. And their aim is not to be rich and run a business and put their feet up at a certain age. It's to find their reason for being. And they look at these four things. What do I enjoy doing? What am I good at? What am I doing that the world needs? And am I getting paid for it? So we're saying when we're attracting staff members into our business, we as business leaders need to articulate so clearly what it is and why we're doing what we're doing, so that we can attract people with similar beliefs as ourselves. And of course, Simon Sinek puts all of this so beautifully in his many talks that he does. Commitment. This is something that we notice a lot of business leaders haven't really grasped, but certainly that element of belonging comes to people when they understand how the business works. Now, many people don't know exactly how all the functional areas and the vision and the measurements all fit together. And it's our responsibility as business leaders to help people understand how business works and also what makes our business work. What is it that makes customers come back to us? Why do customers pay the fees? Why do banks loan us the money? What are our expectations? All of those details should be clearly shared with all staff members at their induction when that happens. People also need to understand their zone of influence. How do they contribute? And sometimes it's very helpful if there's some uniqueness about it. If somebody is responsible for compliance, and we would go to them for compliance, or somebody is responsible for the financial aspect, and we're able to go to them. They feel then that they're important, and that without them, the business wouldn't be quite as efficient. People need to understand themselves, and the PDA process is just fantastic for that. The more people understand themselves, their behavioral traits, the emotional intelligence, aligning values, and also of their team members, it just helps to bind people together. It doesn't really matter, once you've gone through these behavioral assessments, it doesn't really matter if you're an introvert or extrovert. What really does matter is if you understand your different team members. Introverts, of course, they build energy by being by themselves, and extroverts, of course, need to be with people to develop energy. And what a simple thing! If one of our staff members is an extrovert and they have to work from home, they're certainly going to find that difficult. And working in an environment where there's no inhibitors. Quite often, especially in bigger companies, people have rank. You salute the person who's been there longer or who gets paid more. Those become really difficult aspects to bind a team together. Really, we're looking for leaders. We're looking for people to focus on outcomes as a critical aspect, and not so much focused on job descriptions and micromanagement processes and all of that kind of thing. So, of course, as the business grows, a lot changes. And if we look at the bottom right-hand corner, we refer to that as the S-curve, or S-curve 1. And what's happening here is an entrepreneur has started, they're in this survival mode, they tend to be quite directing in the way they run the business. They'll find a client and then they'll make sure that the product is created properly. They'll do the paperwork and the invoicing and administration. And the business can survive very well like that for a period of time. But what happens is it starts growing and the entrepreneur can't do everything themselves. So you move into S-curve 2. So in S-curve 2, what I've just done here is I've pulled out HR. And if you look on the left-hand side at the top, you'll see a workflow process, and we've got the clients on the one side, and we've got the shareholders or the bank on the other side, and we try and identify all of the activities that happen, and then we group those under different headings. You know, what are for marketing, and what are for finance, what are for operations and IT and legal, etc. So now we have job descriptions and role clarity, and people know exactly the activities that they're supposed to do. So this brings some order to the organization, and it's really as a big step from S-curve 1 to S-curve 2. Now, we don't want to stay in S-curve 2 for very long. We want to move out of S-curve 2 and into S-curve 3, where people start working together in teams. Yes, you have meetings and you direct the business as a group, but it's not about following a job description. What a job description does is it says, these are my responsibilities, and it also points out what aren't your responsibilities. Whereas for a company to be sustainable, you all need to be working together. It's just too complicated now for a business leader to identify where he or she wants the business to be in 5 years' time, and then to build the steps to try and get to that point. Because we know in 5 years' time, the world is going to be different again, and we'll get to that place, but we'll find that we don't have the customers that we really hoped we would. So we really need everyone in the organization to be thinking. So this is just a little summary of some of the points. I'll just go through them really quickly. So a business leader needs to know where they're going, and they need to know what they're trying to achieve. They need to make sure that their vision and their idea, the products or service are adding value to the economy, and they support sustainable objectives. They need to be authentic, they need to believe in the work of the enterprise, and be quite sure of its inevitable success. We need that strong functional area foundation. We need to understand that we can't do everything on our own, and we need people and teams to help us to meet those stakeholder expectations. We need to understand about energy. We have a friend, Colin Hall, and he says, energy is created between people. And every time we have an interaction, we either increasing the energy or we decreasing the energy. So if we can start recognizing that we're trying to increase the energy, then some of those activities that decrease energy we'll stop doing automatically. We need to clearly define operational outcomes, and also recognize where our enterprise is in its own evolution, and that's that S-curve maturity. So when we look at these 4 areas and these 34 points that we've discussed, all of it is a science, except that aspect that the entrepreneur brings, that belief, that passion, that will to make a change. That is the only thing that's unique. Every other thing, the functional area of the business, the measurements within the business, and the team process and increasing energy, those are all the science, and we can follow them directly. So this is just a quick checklist as a last slide, and it just goes through all of the points that we've spoken about. And you know, the idea is that we go through it ourselves and we tick off and we see what we're strong on and what we could develop, and knowing very well that if we scored 34 out of 34, then in all likelihood our organization is highly engaged and people do take self-directed action. If some parts are really strong and other parts aren't, it gives us a plan on how to work and to improve these aspects within our business. And that's it. So I hope you found that interesting and helpful. Nicky, back to you.
Oh, thanks, David. That was absolutely fascinating. I must say I learned quite a bit from you, and it ties quite nicely in with my next part of the presentation. So if any of you who don't know me, I'm the office manager of Pro Talent Recruitment, but I'm also a recruiter. So my main job is to fill vacancies at companies. So a company will approach me and say, listen, we're looking for a PA, for example, and my job is to basically find them the right person. So what I'm going to do is just do a share screen. I'm going to quickly just open up my presentation. There we go. Okay. Let me just get this to full screen. There we go. All right, so my topic is basically going to be covering how to attract talent and recruit properly, and strategies to retain your talent. So what a lot of people don't realize is that when they have a position, an open position they need to fill, it gets quite complicated. And I used to be a business owner myself, and I remember thinking, oh my goodness, this person's left, they've grown to a much better opportunity. I'm so happy for them. But now I'm stuck without a staff member. And it is quite difficult to fill that void once the person's left, especially it's also very costly. So what we're going to speak about is strategies to attract talent. And a lot of people don't think about how to attract talent. And there's one major factor I want to discuss with you that actually, that you don't need money for, funny enough. Well, you can, money always helps, but there's a lot of strategies that are actually completely free. So let's begin. How to attract talent. So this is what I was touching on earlier, as I mentioned that you don't need to spend money to get the right people, because what attracts people to jobs is the culture and the company itself. So when I often interview, especially young candidates, they say, oh, I want to work for Derivco, I want to work for RCL Foods, and they name all these huge brands, which are very difficult to get into, firstly, but they have these big dreams and these huge corporations they want to work for. And I say to them, but why? Why do you want to work for Derivco? Why do you want to work for RCL Foods? Why do you want to work for these big brands? And they say, well, they're awesome to work for. Who wouldn't want to work for them? And that leads me to an important point of reputation and culture. Now, it takes sometimes years to build a reputation, and it can take months to completely destroy it. And this is a very important topic that I need to raise with all of you, is that if your company is a good place to work and your staff are happy, you will find the right staff because they will refer people to you. So let's, for example, say you have an open PA position in your company. The staff will actually come to you and say, listen, actually my friend Susie, she's looking for work. She's got the experience we need. Why don't you meet with her? Here's her CV, you know? If your company is doing the right things, your own staff will refer people. And often these referred people are gold. Normally they are gold. Now, you will get the odd, cashier referred to you, whatever the case may be, if, for your high level role, but most of the time the staff understand the role, and so they will refer the right people to you, and they will know what's actually needed. So keep attention to your environment, and you'll actually realize if you've got a nice company to work for or not. So a good work culture sells itself. You won't need to work hard to find staff because they'll find you. All right, so a lot of people don't actually know that they work in a company with a bad reputation. And normally these people who don't know are the managers. So I find in 90% of the companies with a bad reputation, the management are happy as Larry, have been there for 10 plus years. They think the company is the best company in the world, and they don't understand why staff keep leaving. And so there's a huge divide between the actual management and the staff and the ground workers. And the ground workers actually know what's really going on in the company. And so, but the management often don't speak to them. Or if they do try, the relationship is broken down so much that staff don't talk to them and won't tell them anything because they're scared. So what I want to address with you is how important it is to create a good culture. And a lot of people don't realize what destroys their culture is they don't know what they are doing to actually offend their staff. And this is the breakdown between management and the actual staff. So I'll give you an example of a company. I won't say the company name, but there are a handful of companies in Durban that I actually recruit for that have really bad reputations. And when I call candidates and say, listen, it's this X, Y, and Z company, they go, no, do not send my CV there. My uncle, sister's brother's cousin worked for them and they are horrible, So a lot of companies in Durban have this reputation and we still recruit for them, because not every company is as bad as people say it is. You know, most of the time it's just a disgruntled staff member, past staff member who's now poisoning the brand, which happens a lot more than you realize. So again, touching on how to treat your staff properly, even if they end up leaving, please treat them as nicely as possible, because they will destroy your brand if you don't. So it's really, really important to have a good reputation in the market. So as I was mentioning, we will even recruit for companies with so-called bad reputations, because often that's not the case. And we know what I always say in recruitment is there's someone for everyone. So even though the company might have a bad reputation, the right person is out there somewhere who doesn't think that's a bad reputation and they're actually okay with it, you know. So there's always a right person for a right company. So if you think you're in a company that's got a horrible reputation and you're feeling like we'll never find the right staff member, it's over, you know, don't feel that way, because there is the right person for every company. Okay, so what I want to talk about is how poor management can actually break down the reputation of a company. So again, management can often view themselves as separate, as better, as superior, and they look at their staff like they don't know what they're doing. And what I've found from interviewing candidates is a lot of the time they aren't inducted or trained properly. And so what will happen is someone will resign, move on to a better opportunity, and then they spend months recruiting the next person. This person then comes in and has 2 days to learn the entire job. And then the company keeps measuring them against the person who's left. And this results in just a terrible, you know, you're almost inviting the person to leave if you do that. Your induction process needs to be thorough, it really does. And then what will happen is that there's a breakdown in relationship between management and a staff member, because the staff member will try and talk to them and say, listen, I need a bit more training on this. And then management assumes that they're stupid, and then they start gunning for them. You know, I've seen this happen time and time again. So give your staff the benefit of the doubt, try and help them as much as possible, and have an open door policy. A big one, funny enough, Durban has a reputation of paying poorly, and although I've seen lots of companies who do pay poorly all over South Africa, I must agree that companies, you know, especially in Durban, don't pay very nicely. For example, I've got companies hunting for, you know, I'll stick to the example of a PA. I've got companies looking for a high-level PA paying 6,000 Rand, you know, and they're expecting this high-level person, but high-level people are earning 20, 30,000 as a PA, you know. And so there's this big divide between the actual market value of a job and what the company wants to offer. So pay attention to what you offer as a salary, because, I mean, even as a recruiter, I have certain companies that I know pay terribly. So when they come to me and say, listen, we're looking for, you know, an accountant, I just roll my eyes and I think, well, you're probably going to be paying 10,000 Rand for an accountant. You should be earning 20,000, you know. And so poor compensation is a very big deal. And sometimes people will take the job because they're desperate, but then they'll leave soon afterwards. So you need to make sure your salaries are market related. And if you don't pay market related salaries, your company will earn the reputation of being poor payers. Okay, so next one is matters not dealt with effectively or quickly. And so what often happens is there's a whole chain of commands, people in the company who actually are in charge of things. So you'll complain to your manager and say, listen, Susie's being nasty to me. She treats me horribly. And then your manager then goes to the next manager and says, listen, we have a complaint from the department below. What do I do? And then they say, no, you know what, I'm meeting with them next week. Rather just wait. And then things just keep getting postponed. And eventually a month later, nothing's been done. And I promise you, if you leave a matter for more than a few days, the staff are going to get very upset. So you need to deal with matters quickly and effectively. Also, it doesn't help if you discipline your staff a month later. So for example, let's just say your staff member, Susie, was rude to a client on the phone. Rather address it with them as quick as possible, because often they'll be more understanding and more forgiving. So even though you're disciplining them, no one likes being disciplined, but even if you are disciplining them, do it as quickly as possible and as calmly as possible. So rather just deal with things as quickly as possible. Another example of matters not being dealt with quickly and effectively is, for example, if a staff member comes to you and says, listen, I'm struggling with the salary, you know, you promised me a salary increase over the next year and I haven't heard anything from you. Please, can you get back to me? And this is where companies will often stall, because they don't want to give an increase. They don't want to pay the person more for whatever reasons, and they'll stall and they'll stall. And in the meantime, that staff member is putting their CV out there. So there's a lot of things that you can actually, that will actually ruin a company reputation. Okay, so next is how to identify if you have a bad culture. So this is actually a very interesting topic, and it makes you really think about your company. Because I mean, you as management, you don't normally know if your staff are happy or not. And you don't really know if you have a bad reputation because you are biased. So I work for Pro Talent Recruitment, and let's say someone hated Pro Talent Recruitment, they're probably not going to tell me because I'm the manager. So as a manager, you probably won't hear all the bad news, but it's always out there. So these are key identifiers that'll tell you if you have a bad reputation, if you have a bad culture. So firstly, look at how long your average employee lasts. I normally say, you know, especially in the modern times, people don't stay long at jobs. It seems to be a trend going on that within 2 to 3 to 4 years, people move. And I don't know why. It seems to be the modern trend. And so I would say if you have staff turnover of an average of about 2 to 3 years, that's okay. That's fine, you know. But if you have every year new staff, there's a problem. You know, normally even the youngsters, even they always say these millennials, but even the millennials normally last about 2 to 3 years before moving on. And if you have staff changing every single year, there's a problem, you know. And for example, in a period of 3 years, if you have having whole new teams at a time, that's really bad. It shows there's something not right that staff aren't telling you. And it's really tough because often they don't tell you. But remember, there's a reason why they won't tell you. There's something that's broken down between you and the staff that causes them to not talk to you. So and I find this with management, they often blame staff. Oh, but they don't do this and they don't do that and they're terrible, you know. And there's always this attitude of superiority from managers, and staff can pick that up. They really do. So they won't talk to you. Okay, so the first indicator is how long does the average employee last? Next is your staff protective over their lunch breaks? And I see this time and time again, where the lunch break is from 12 to 1. At 11:59, they pack up and they're gone, and you don't see them, and you can't get a hold of them. Even if it was something urgent, let's say a client phones through and needs something done urgently, which no one knew needed to be done, you can't get a hold of that person. They're gone, and it's every day the same thing. You can't get a hold of them, and they are so protective over their lunch break. And if you ask them to help you out with something during their lunch break, they roll their eyes at you, and they're like, "Why do I have to give up my lunch break for you?" So that's another example of a bad reputation, a bad culture, because a staff member that is truly happy won't mind giving up their lunch break for you, you know? So that's one indicator as well. Another one is quite an obvious one, which I mean, people normally know about, is an abuse of sick leave, or even just leave in general. So for example, every month, you know, there's a death in the family. Every month they have some sort of new condition, you know, and they literally have a sore toe and they take them off work, you know. And they always have these convenient doctor's notes. And, you know, even now I'm speaking like a manager. So this is exactly what happens is, you know, if your staff are unhappy, they will abuse their sick leave and they will abuse their leave because they don't want to be at work. They're unhappy. So if you're seeing this happen, rather just talk to your staff. The last one is when you notice your staff pack up like just before work closes. So for example, if you finish at 4:30, at 4:15, they're already packing up and they're ready to go. And literally as the bell rings for 4:30, they dash out of here and they're gone. You know, that's another indicator of someone who isn't happy, or if you've got a bad culture, because they're not wasting a second more of their time at your work. They're not going to do that. And they want to get out of there on time, you know, so they can go return to their happy life. So I'm not saying that if any of your staff do this, that it means that they are, you know, that you've got a horrible company. I mean, there are other factors in there. Sometimes staff are unhappy for their own reasons. Maybe they've got problems at home or something like that you don't know about. But chances are, if any of your staff members do this, probably they're not happy. And it's your job to find out why. And it's often a very difficult job. And staff often aren't honest because they're scared of losing their jobs. So it's an entire culture shift that you'll have to do in order to find out what's actually causing your bad reputation. And it can literally be down to one bad manager. One bad apple can ruin an entire batch, I promise you. So you could have one bad manager in some other department that is tiny and there's barely any staff there, but those unhappy staff will infect the entire company. So you have to make sure that your management is competent and also happy and open, you know, they have an open door policy, because if they don't, your management can actually ruin the reputation of the company without even thinking about it. Okay, so next is how to recruit properly. So as a recruiter, I mean, my job is to recruit, and of course there are so many ways to actually do recruitment. I mean, there's free ways, there's paid ways, and I mean, we do all of them. So we cover everything from, you know, paying for LinkedIn advertising through to specific job portals like Indeed or PNet or something like that. And we even do, if we're desperate, we'll go to Gumtree, you know. So we do everything for you. But at the same time, linking back to my point in the beginning, is that if you have a good reputation, you won't really need to recruit, and so you won't really need to advertise. But what I do suggest is, I mean, every company has got positions that need to be filled, and are often very rare skills. So for example, I mean, we deal with specialist industries like IT, manufacturing, whatnot, and there are some very rare skills. So for example, in IT, there are, I mean, I don't even do IT, so please don't quote me on this, but I know our IT recruiters constantly looking for developers. It is a constant thing. And even though your reputation might be the best in the world, there's a shortage of skills in this area in South Africa. And to find a good developer who wants to stay in Durban, it's very difficult. And even then, developers are, you know, because they're so rare, they earn really high salaries. So most companies can't even afford a good developer because they know their worth and they can get 30, 40K from Daruvco, easy peasy, no problems with that, you know. So this is where your culture makes a difference. For example, my fiance is a developer and he works for actually quite a small company, and their developers, they are so happy. They keep on trying to, like the other recruiters keep trying to steal them, but they're not going anywhere because they love their company. And that culture has kept them there for a long time, and it'll continue to keep them there. So remember, your culture is very important when it comes to recruitment. But going back to my point of if you need to recruit and if you have a vacancy that's particularly difficult to fill, as I mentioned earlier, have an internal referral process. So your first step is advertise internally. You have to ethically and morally, and I mean, you don't have to legally advertise internally, but I mean, normally you do. You have to let your staff know about this vacancy. And normally there is a referral program in place. So for example, if you're hiring for a developer, you can have your notice up on the staff notice board, or you can send an email out to all the staff saying, listen, we are looking for a developer. It's a very rare skill, and because you know you're going to struggle to find this person, you can even have it incentivized. I know lots of companies in Durban who actually offer 5,000 Rand if your candidate gets hired, and you have no idea how much it motivates people. I mean, we have a company in Pinetown who does this, who pays 5,000 Rand, even if it's a low level position. 5,000 Rand if your candidate gets the job. And that's incredible. Like, now I'm finding that I'm recruiting for this company and I'm fighting with their staff members because we're gunning for the same candidates. But at the end of the day, if you know, how recruitment works is if the person was contacted by, you know, their friend first, then, you know, then I have no right to actually contact that person. So it almost becomes competitive, even more competitive now in the recruitment industries, if your staff are actually trying to recruit for you. And it's a brilliant process. It's got so many advantages because now your staff are more involved in the business. They feel more part of it because, well, they're going to make more money, which is great, but also their choices will now affect the business, and hopefully in a good way, and they'll want it to be a good thing. So they will only refer the best people they can find. And for example, I know developers within Durban, they all know each other. Software developers, they all know each other. So if you're hiring a rare skill and you have someone in your company who has that skill, chances are they're going to know lots of people. So always have an internal referral process. You need to do that first. Another thing is also, if you know that you are always keeping your eyes open for a certain type of person, a certain type of talent, on your website, have a vacancies section. And look, legally, you're not allowed to advertise something that doesn't exist. So you can't say hiring a PA, but there's no PA job. You can't do that. That's illegal. But what you can do is say it's a talent pool advert. So you say executive assistant position, in brackets, you put their talent pool, and then people will know that you're building a talent pool. You're not actually right now hiring. So a lot of companies do that for their really, really difficult to fill positions. They are always advertising on their website, and maybe even on LinkedIn or PNet or whatever the case, they're always advertising because these positions are so difficult to fill that if you happen to get an application, even when you're actually not really hiring, and you get an application for a software developer who has exactly what you normally look for, you will make a plan and you'll hire them because you know in a year or 6 months, you'll actually be looking again. And it actually just works out better to rather just hire them now and get them into the company and induct them properly, rather than do a quick forceful hire 6 months down the line where you're rushing. Now the position is available. Now you really need someone. So now you rush through your recruitment process and end up hiring the wrong person. So my other advice is to always keep your eyes open for talent. Always. You need to do that. So as I was mentioning earlier about these really difficult to fill positions, I do advise using recruitment agencies. I mean, I am promoting myself and our company, but we are actually free until you hire one of our candidates. And a lot of companies are sneaky, but they use us to see what's out there. But you know what, it's fine. We don't mind being used, because eventually we'll win you over, because we know what we're doing and we will always have the better candidates, because we do in-depth checks. You know, we do background checks. We do everything you need. We can even test the candidates on certain programs. So at the end of the day, we know what we are doing. We are specialists. And so I always recommend having a couple recruitment agencies on board. You know, I never say only have one. You know, as a recruitment agency, I'd love to be your only recruitment agency. But from a company and a business owner's perspective, I would say have 2 or 3 recruitment agencies that you trust, and say to them, listen, I'm always looking for a software developer. If you find me one, we're good to go, you know. So use recruitment agencies, because we will only charge you if you hire our candidates. So by us advertising, giving you CVs, arranging interviews, it's completely free. You've got nothing to lose. And if you hire one of our candidates, that means you're happy with them. So it means you'll be happy to pay us. Okay, so lastly there are free recruitment methods. I would not recommend these personally. I call them recruitment suicide if you put an ad on Gumtree, because you'll get 10,000 cashiers applying for your high-level exec position. But there are occasions where I have used Gumtree when I've become so desperate because I can't find anyone. And Gumtree is a really popular website. I mean, people often go on that. And what will happen is, although you'll get that cashier looking at your advert, I mean, that cashier might have a friend who has a friend who is a exec person. So it's always good to try if you are desperately seeking, and none of the other methods are working. Another method I want to mention to you is social media. Excuse me. So we actually use Facebook and Instagram to advertise our jobs, and this is completely free. So look, I wouldn't recommend using the Facebook job option, because there is an option on Facebook where you can actually advertise it as a job through Facebook and people will apply through Facebook. My personal opinion of it is that, again, it's like Gumtree. You get cashiers applying for everything, which doesn't work. But what we normally do is we create an advert using like a graphic design program, and we have like a little advert and we put it up with a little caption and we say, send your CV to Nicky at ProPoint. You know, and social media, things get shared a lot. And there's also Facebook groups. Like, so I use Facebook quite a lot personally, because there's a job group called Jobs 911. There's actually entire job portals, job groups that are dedicated to recruitment. So it's really good to use those. Next is how do you lose talent during your recruitment process? And this is one of my favorite things to talk about, because companies have no idea what they are doing to destroy their reputation and destroy the whole process. I've seen interviews, I've actually watched interviews happen where the manager sits arms crossed and looks at the candidate and goes, why should I hire you? You know, and just like a horrible expression on their face. And managers often, I mean, their job is management. Their job is to look after staff. Or if it's a supervisor in a warehouse, they're not interviewers. You know, they're not HR personnel. They don't know how to interview people. And I promise you, something as small as your facial expressions during an interview can put a candidate off. I've had it in the past where the candidate comes back after an interview crying because the manager gave them a nasty look, and look, they are very soft, and listen, it was for a PA position, so it's understandable. But I mean, you can literally lose really, really good staff members or potential staff members just by not watching your recruitment process. Okay, I'm running short of time, so I'm just going to try and move along as quickly as I can. Within the recruitment process, it needs to normally be closed within the first month. Normally in recruitment, you should advertise, interview, and the whole process should take about a month. The most important part is giving feedback to your candidates. So any candidates who've made it past the first round of interviews, if they don't hear from you in about 2 weeks' time, they're gone. And this is normal. So you need to actually keep in contact with your candidates. Even if You're just stringing them along. Just let them know you still are thinking of them, but there's some setbacks. Just talk to them. You don't need to promise them anything. Just say, listen, we're experiencing a delay. We'll get back to you in another week. You don't need to explain anything. So just keep in touch with your candidates. Next is the salary offered is too low. I see this so often. The job is advertised at 15,000 Rand. I get them a candidate, they offer them 12,000 Rand. It's insulting to the candidate, insulting to me. Please don't lowball your candidates. Even if they are on 10,000 Rand, if you advertise a job at 15 and the candidate expects 15, you need to offer them that. And if you don't, for example, if you're doing an interview and you can see they're on 9,000 Rand and you can see they're 115, just talk to them up front about it rather and just say, listen, because of your experience, we can maybe offer you 12 if we were to get to that stage. So don't have them waiting and expecting 15,000 Rand when you're not really going to offer them that, because they will automatically reject your offer. Last one is personality assessments. So personality assessments are amazing. They should always be a part of your recruitment process. I highly recommend them. And I mean, we use Cheryl McKinnon from PDA. He's incredible. And the PDA assessments are amazing and so insightful. But I've had companies who, before even interviewing a candidate, will request a personality assessment and then regret them purely on their personality assessment. And I mean, having done a few myself, I know the mood that I'm in at that time can affect the assessment. So as a recruiter, my advice is to never regret candidates based purely on their assessment. You should look at them in combination, and you should consider the person and the assessment, and maybe even meet them again to talk about things. But never dismiss someone based purely on their personality assessment. Okay. Lastly is, I mentioned a lot of this earlier, so I don't need to spend too much time on this. I've interviewed about 2,300 people over the past 4 years that I've been in recruitment. These are the most common reasons, and I've counted them, I promise you, we've got a counter. So I've interviewed a lot of people, and these are the most common reasons for leaving. And I want you to pay attention to these because this could be why your staff are leaving. No room for growth. People often complain they've reached the ceiling, and if they're a bookkeeper, they're going to be a bookkeeper for the next 15 years there. They're not happy with that. Next is not being heard, or their opinions don't matter. As much as a bookkeeper or an admin clerk has really nothing to do with the entire running of the business, they really want to matter. They want to feel involved. And often they complain and say to me, you know what, I'm so tired. I try to help, I try to do this, but they don't even care about me. So that also goes in with the next point of no recognition. And this is something, it's such a stereotypical thing, but I find this with millennials a lot. And I'm a millennial, so I can say yes. No recognition. Like, we want every movement to be thank you'd and appreciated. And it's honestly, most people don't do it. And it's the reality of the world is you won't probably get recognition for anything you do, but it affects the young people a lot. They really want their recognition. So just try and make a plan and thank them for good work. It makes a big difference. Incentives, often companies don't offer incentives, and often maybe the job doesn't really need incentives, but it makes a big difference. Or even the package deal. So if you offer medical aid or provident fund, it means a lot to staff. Poor management, I did touch on this earlier, and I did go into quite a few examples, and also overwork. So example of this would be one of your admin staff quits and the other one ends up with her entire job, and you don't pay her more, you don't acknowledge her anymore. And I see it all the time. So that's something really important. So to round off, having an open door policy with your staff is really important. Make sure they can talk to you, and give them a fair and honest opportunity to voice their concerns to you. Excuse me, my throat's drying out. But yeah, so just talk to your staff, and you'll find they probably won't want to talk at first, but eventually if you keep at it and keep showing them that there won't be any negative consequences, they will eventually talk to you. So yeah, I think that is about it from my side. So again, covering my topics was how to attract talent and recruit properly, and how to have strategies on how to retain your staff. So I really hope that has helped you, and I really hope that we'll keep in contact soon. But if you need to contact me, here's my details. I mean, Dave did actually leave his details on the other slide. This whole thing will be recorded, so we are going to put it on YouTube. But yeah, so that was basically it from my side. Everyone, thank you so much for your time. I know I ran over time. I'm sorry, I'm 4 minutes over time. But everyone, thank you so much. And Dave, it was so lovely having you part of this today. And it was lovely to get to know everyone and get to know you and your company a bit better. It was fascinating. But Dave, do you have anything you want to say to finish off?
Nicky, I just wanted to say thank you, man. I just loved the messages that you shared. I too learned so much, and thank you so much for that. You just put it across so beautifully and effortlessly. So thank you, and thank you for letting me be on your show today.
Oh, lovely. Well, it was lovely to have you here. Thank you so much, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day, and thank you so much. Thank you. Okay, bye-bye.